Hello, everybody. It's Mr. Yamas again with our sixth online lecture on imperialism. And we're going to go ahead and get started real quick on imperialism. So, imperialism, the two words that we have to know here, imperial and empire. Okay. So, an empire is known to be in a huge piece of land, a huge territory. So, imperialism is going to be the action of taking over land by force because you want the resources. So, for example, Britain in this picture, Germany in this picture, and Russia in this picture, because they want more land, so they're going to go look for it, right? So, for example, Germany here is looking for land in Africa. Russia here is looking for land in South Asia here. And Britain is waiting for their turn. And you see how the picture says it's my grab bag. So grab anything you want. Grab anything there for your purposes, for your resources and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and see why countries and nations like Russia, Britain, France, Germany, why they started to get land by force. And you see the definition here. Imperialism is controlling another territory by force, right? So why is it that they're doing that? Well, because they need more resources. Okay. Europe has been going through industrialization, as we've already covered, industrialization, producing all these goods that the people that we want, right? So they need more resources. And so they said, you know who has those resources? Africa. And when we mean by resources, guys, we mean stuff like coal, like iron, like oil, like diamonds, like rubber, like all these resources so that they can create the stuff that people want, right? So, for example, if the British people said, we all want jewelry, like that's what we want. But Britain is like, well, I don't have the diamonds to make it. So rather than saying, let me go to Africa and trade, they said, no, let me go to Africa and take the land, dig up the diamonds, and then do the jewelry. So imperialism, again, is controlling another territory by force. Okay, they're going to, basically, it's like they're declaring war, and then they're just taking the land by force. So you can see here, Africa is dug. It's all dug up, right? Like it's all carved up. So why? Because they carved up all the resources, and Europe and America here are more wealthy than them because they took all the resources. That's what imperialism is. It could have been the same thing here on Latin America if North America here had carved up all the resources here, like the oil and stuff, and just carving it up. So taking advantage of another one. So what are the motives, the causes? Why did these countries say, all right, aside from resources, aside from the oil, aside from the diamonds, or aside from the rubber or steel or whatever I need from the other countries, why else am I doing this? Well, there's a couple of things here. There's an acronym, and the acronym is right here. NERDS. NERDS. So it's basically each letter stands for something that were there. So here are the motives. The first one is nationalism. The second one is economics. The third one is religion. The fourth one is Darwinism, and then social Darwinism, which these last two can really go together. So nationalism is extreme pride for your country. You know, basically they said, oh, I'm going to go show the other country my power and my superiority. So look, go take over Africa. And then they went to go take over Africa, and then France and any other country were like, oh, they're super superior. Well, let's show them that we're also strong. Okay, so that's one thing there. Economics, well, again, they needed natural resources. They wanted to control the trade. They said, we need oil, we need rubber, we need steel, we need these things. We can get them in Africa. And again, Africa is, to them, Africa is a very poor continent, so we shouldn't even be even dealing with them. Just take over the land for the money. Okay, that's the E, the economic. Religion, they just wanted to spread Christianity. They said, okay, Africa, why are you believing in the God of the stick or whatever? No, there's only one God, and his name is his God, and his son is Jesus Christ. And so they wanted to convert these people. They wanted to have so they can look good in the eyes of God. Look, God, what I'm doing for you. I'm taking over them and I'm converting them to you. So that was a cause and a motive. Darwinism and social Darwinism go the same. Charles Darwin and the idea of survival of the fittest. We have to survive at all means. So if the poor people over there cannot defend themselves, but we can, then that's fine. Ni modo, that survival of the fittest. That's how Charles Darwin says. And social Darwinism also says that a lot of people and a lot of countries started to believe that if you lived in Africa, or if you had a very weird culture, like, why are you following a god that has all these arms and legs and eyes and ears? Like, that was inferior to the Europeans. So they said, we got to take over, and we got to teach you the good things of what the Europeans think the good things are. And phrenology, they also said, why do you have your head like that, shaped like that? Sometimes, I've seen it with you guys too. You all make fun of each other and your physical attributes. This is social Darwinism. Social Darwinism is, and phrenology is basically the study of the skull and the skull sizes. And then from there, they started to have all these interesting, if you have this skull size, that means you're very inferior. That's phrenology. And mostly everything was because of expansionism. They wanted to conquer all these lands just so that they can be the big empire. All right, just so that they can be the big empire. So let's go just a little bit of scramble, what we call the scramble for Africa, because eventually it wasn't just going to be Britain or France that were going to be like, hey, let's take over some land in Africa. It was going to be tons of countries, like 14 countries. Okay, so in 1880, France began to expand to West Africa for diamonds and gold. So anything in green is what France has. So they went for diamonds and gold. But then Britain was like, well, I want diamonds and gold too, and I want oil, and I want steel, and I want rubber, and I want all these things. So they said, you know what? Let's sit down, and let's say we all sit down, 14 of us sit down, and we lay out the map of Africa, okay? And we start saying, what do you have right now? And then you start saying, for example, let's say I was Germany, anything in the brown here, and I said, well, right now I only have this little piece right here. And then, okay. So then they would go to Britain. What do you have right now? And then I only have this little piece over here. And then they went to France. Well, I have this little piece over here and this one over here as well. And then they went to Portugal and so on. So then from there they started saying, okay, well, what about if you get this piece, this piece, this piece, I get this piece, you get that piece, and then you're going to get those other pieces over there. So the country started saying, yeah, let's do it. That's fine. We all get a fair share. But the problem was that they did not take into account the local cultures or traditions of the people. So, for example, let's say there was a culture right here. It says French West Africa. Let's say there was a culture here. And as much, I'll give you a perfect example on the Hutus and in Rwanda. Okay, the Hutus and the Tutsis and stuff like that. Let's say that the Hutus in Rwanda were divided into two. Let's say the Hutus were right here. All right, so now the Hutus were going to be under British and German rule, but they're going to be separated because it's two countries now. It's part of a different country. So they did not take into account local cultures or traditions. Okay, so this is going to lead to future conflicts when the Europeans leave. When the Europeans finally carved up all of Africa and they said, "There's nothing anymore here. What are we doing here?" And then they finally leave. Well, the cultures that were divided are going to go into conflicts. They're going to go into war, and then they're going to be like, no, we're going to be in charge of this country now. And the other culture is going to be like, no, Africa for Africans, and then stuff like that. So they're going to start fighting and having cultures. This happened in 1994 or 95, if I'm not mistaken, with the Hutus and the Tutsis in Rwanda. As soon as the Dutch left, as soon as the UN also left, the local culture started to fight for power. It's like mobs. They're just fighting for power there. Conflicts will arise, like the revolt by Shaka Zulu down here, and the Boer War also. Some of the Africans are going to revolt against the white man, as they would call them, and then the Boer War was a war between England and the Dutch, and just to see who's going to take control of this South Africa. And so a lot of conflicts started to happen as well, even though they had already divided this. So conflicts between countries were going to happen, and conflicts within the people of Africa. Again, within the people of Africa, it was just going to be mostly like, who is going to be in charge now that the white man, that the Europeans have left? Okay. And this is another map of the scramble of Africa. As you can see here, France France, I want this part. Spain, I want this. Portugal, I want this. Italy, I want this. Germany, I want this. Great Britain, I want this part. And Belgium, I want this part right here. So they had to have the Berlin Conference of 1884 to do this division as well. Okay. And I'm just going to read U.S. imperialism. Not only were the European countries doing it, but also the United States was doing it. For example, under imperialism, we started getting the islands on the Pacific, mostly like Hawaii, Guam, and Midway. That's why we have Hawaii, because we started saying, look, there's a little island over here next to us. What is it? It's Hawaii. Okay, it's ours now. But they had to basically kind of fight for it, but they really didn't. You can see here, they just overthrew the queen. Queen Liliuokalani, they overthrew her, and they basically forced her to sign over Hawaii to the United States. President Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, was gonna say, like, there's a little piece of land over there by Land America. It's very thin, so maybe we can carve it up and make a canal so that we can pass through it. Because before you had to go all the way down to the tip of South America and back up. So Theodore Roosevelt said, nope, we can just cut the land in the middle and then cross through the Panama Canal. And then for Cuba and countries and little islands like the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Guam, you're going to go through this war called the Spanish-American War. Okay, the Spanish-American War, which is Cuba backed by the United States versus Spain, because at the end of the day, United States said, you know what, if we help Cuba against the Spaniards, eventually when we win against the Spaniards leave, and then we take over Cuba. But that didn't go as planned. So Cuba ended up being its own little country eventually, and so on and so forth. So you can read this U.S. imperialism, and you'll go over U.S. stuff as juniors. And then the last thing we want to cover here are the positive and the negative effects of imperialism. What are the positive effects of someone taking over the land by force? Well, it improves sanitation in some areas. So, for example, Europeans introduced, you have to take a shower, man. You have to wash your hands, dude, type of thing. Sanitation. Provided hospitals and schools, because some Europeans were there. They built hospitals and schools, and some of them allowed African children to go into these schools, so they were being taught, and that means that the literacy rates, the reading rates were going up. And because Africa did not have railroads and telephones, well, the white people, the Europeans brought that with them and started to put them all over Africa. And then when they left, they just left them there. So it didn't really, that was a positive effect there. The negatives, though, Africans lost control of mostly all the land. Again, it was all going to the Europeans, as you can see this picture. Died of new diseases. Again, the Europeans were bringing diseases with them. Breakup of traditional cultures. We already went over that. It can be like, for example, Nuevo Laredo and Laredo were the same people. We really are. We have family on that side. If you have family on that side, some of us grew up on both sides or visited both sides. And it's divided by a border. And this is a perfect example of breakup of traditional cultures. Although we still follow tradition. It's like if Nuevo Laredo and Laredo there, and we here we follow 4th of July, but over there they follow the Mexican independence. So it's basically all breakup as traditional cultures. Division of the African continent. Again, they started dividing up Africa into who's gonna get what. And mistreatment and torture. Yes, some of the Africans were being tortured and mistreated as well. So this is what we call imperialism. I know I went a little fast, but really, really, the most important thing that you got to know about imperialism is controlling another territory by force. And the best thing that you can possibly remember is this picture right here. Just picture a European country or the United States extending and grabbing whatever they want because they're too powerful and the other countries are not. That's imperialism. So again, they need it because of the resources, and they need it because of the stuff that they wanted at that point. So if you have any questions, once again, email, ask your teacher, and they'll help you out. So until next time.